Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Ages and Seasons, both released on February 27th of 2001, just 15 years after the original Legend of Zelda released. And similarly to many other titles in the franchise, these two games had the ambition to be more like the first Zelda game, which is something that I still don't really understand given how mediocre the first Zelda game was, why so many games want to replicate it. But in the case of these two handheld titles, they tried to focus more on adventure rather than the more linear style that had been present in both A Link to the Past as well as Link's Awakening. And in that regard, I guess I can respect them. But with that in mind, while I do appreciate both of these games and they have a lot of similarities, I do have to review them separately. And since alphabetical order is the typical way of organization, we're going to start with the Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Ages. Now, to be completely honest, if I wasn't a massive Zelda fan, I would probably hate this game. And that's not to say that it's bad, it just has a lot of things that I really don't like in video games. For one, this game has basically the same music and soundtracks of A Link to the Past as well as Link's Awakening. And when there is an original song, especially in Oracle of Ages, it's just terrible. On top of that, a lot of this game's art style is basically ripped from Link's Awakening, and it kind of fails in a lot of the originality sense, not just with the music and the presentation, but another thing I'm going to complain about is the main theme of this game, which is the hourglass, more or less, between the present and the past. And in this game, you are able to more or less freely control different teleportation devices to get from the past to the present, which is a pretty cool concept that we've already seen 3 different times in Zelda games. The Dark World in A Link to the Past was basically the exact same thing. The concepts of child era as well as adult era when it came to Ocarina of Time was also basically the exact same thing, and even the 3 days concept in Majora's Mask was the same thing around time, which kinda makes this game falter because its main primary selling point and idea has already been done before, and it's been done significantly better than how it is in this game. On top of that, a major difference between Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages is that Ages focuses more on puzzles, while Seasons focuses more on combat. And normally I like a mixture in Zelda games, but if I am to choose between combat and puzzles when it comes to these two games, I gotta say I vastly prefer the combat of Seasons because the puzzles in this game are just not my thing. The dungeons in this game are at least 30 minutes each, and it is not entertaining in the slightest. The dungeons range anywhere from mediocre to terrible. The last 4 dungeons in this game were some of the worst that I have played in a Zelda game, with the 7th dungeon inside Jabu Jabu's belly possibly being the worst dungeon that I've played so far on this channel. It was that bad. Worse than the Great Bay and worse than the Water Temple. But even with that in mind, The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Ages just falters because of the games that came before it, in which it doesn't really stand out in any way. This might be part of the reason why the Oracle games are never talked about, because they really don't stand out that much when compared to the games before and after them. And that especially goes for Oracle of Ages. I gotta say though, this game's sense of adventure is pretty cool, and I'm not gonna lie, there were some characters in this game that I didn't mind. It didn't quite have the memorable characters of Ocarina of Time, but I would say it had better characters than A Link to the Past, and that's gotta count for something. All in all, I don't think Oracle of Ages is a terrible game. There was just a lot of stuff that personally I did not like about this one. I really don't like the idea of modern companies just remaking the same game, and a lot of Oracle of Ages is just unoriginal ideas, all the way back in 2001. and I really felt like this game could have utilized the Game Boy Color in much better ways than it did, through a terrible soundtrack, mediocre characters, and a story that I gotta say doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Basically, there's this nightmare thing, kinda like in Link's Awakening, that takes control of Nehru and then possesses the queen and I guess just wants to turn everyone to stone. The motivations aren't really clear, and it's not really understood, at least from my perspective, why it even needed to kidnap Nehru in the first place, or possess Nehru's body. Yeah, not really my thing. But I gotta say, this game, again, wasn't terrible, but there were a lot of things for me to complain about in this one, which is why I'm going to give The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages a 6 out of 10. The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons is definitely an improvement over Oracle of Ages. In fact, in many ways, I prefer this game significantly over Oracle of Ages, which was surprising to me because honestly, after playing Oracle of Ages and then Seasons, I was kind of expecting more or less the same result. But actually, this game is much more creative and I would say likable to me at least. So let me explain why. First of all, Oracle of Seasons just has a better looking color palette, and the idea behind seasons instead of ages is significantly more creative, as instead of just having 2 worlds to flip through, you have 4 different overworlds, that being winter, spring, summer, and fall, and all of them have a completely different color palette, which looks really nice on the Game Boy Color, and definitely takes advantage of the software, where Oracle of Ages didn't really do that at all. But Oracle of Seasons also, in my opinion, just had slightly better humor and lines, but also that the dungeons just felt better. Of course, the more focus on action rather than long and obscure puzzles will definitely do that for a game, and while I wouldn't say any of the dungeons were necessarily great, most of them were pretty mediocre, there actually weren't any major dungeons that I have to complain about, so I'll take it, I guess. But also, the music in this game is a little bit better, and I say that hesitantly because the music still isn't that good in this game. It's really bad in both games, which is really shocking since the one thing that Zelda almost always gets right is the music, but that isn't even the case here. Either way, this game definitely feels like it's moving on from Link's Awakening, and while it still is the same general style, it feels like a completely different game, where Oracle of Ages was very clearly resembling the same style that Link's Awakening was, with the only exception of that being that the game is not all a dream. And I will say that I think Din is a much more fleshed out character compared to Nehru, and the villain's motivation makes a little bit more sense. While I don't really like that Twin Roba is sniffed into this one, I still do understand having a crazy final boss fight at the end, although I will admit the lead up to the final boss is more than enough for me. But it still is enjoyable, and I do like this game, as well as the previous ones when it comes to the boss fights. These games were trying to replicate the adventure feeling of Zelda 1, and while I wasn't the biggest fan of Zelda 1, I can still appreciate both of these games for all that they did. Oracle of Seasons was just a little bit better for me, and felt more on par with A Link to the Past than with Link's Awakening, which is why I'm going to give The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons a 7 out of 10.